Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered, even in millions of eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, may we all generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now, let's continue our study of the words of my perfect teacher. We are now discussing the impermanence of life, which is divided into 7 sections. Among these, today we will discuss the meditation on the impermanence of noble beings. The original text states, "In the present good kalpa, Vipassana, Sikhin, and 5 other Buddhas have already appeared, each with his own circle of Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddha and Arhats in inconceivable number. Each worked to bring benefit to innumerable beings through the teachings of the 3 vehicles. Yet nowadays all we have is whatever still remains of the Buddha Sakyamuni's teaching. Otherwise, all of those Buddhas have passed into nirvana, and all the pure Dharma teachings they gave have gradually disappeared. One by one, all the great Shravakas of our present Buddha, each accompanied by their retinue of 500 Arhats, have passed beyond suffering into nirvana without remainder, where the aggregates are completely exhausted. The words are straightforward. The 1,000 Buddhas of the good kalpa refer to the 1,000 Buddhas manifesting during this good kalpa. Among them, according to the sequence of their appearance, the 4 Buddhas, including Shakyamuni Buddha, have already manifested. Before this kalpa, Buddhas like Vipassana and Sikhin had also appeared in the world. The 7 Buddhas we usually refer to have all come into being. And when each Buddha was in this world, they did not come alone. They all had countless enlightened Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other innumerable retinues. These Buddhas came to this world to benefit countless beings through the teachings of the 3 vehicles, just like Buddha Shakyamuni. However, among all the Buddhas, whether it's the first 7 Buddhas or the first 4 Buddhas, only the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni are still with us. All the other Buddhas have already entered nirvana, such as Buddha Kashyapa or Buddha Sikhin. Although we still recite the Buddha Sikhin's name, there are no historical or textual records on how Buddha Sikhin turned the wheel of Dharma and what teachings he gave. If there were, we would have seen the Tripitaka of this Buddha and the Tripitaka of that Buddha. But all we have seen is that in some ancient scriptures, a few references to a certain Buddha in the past. Among the 7 Buddhas, some of their verses are recorded in the Vinaya Sutra and other scriptures. Apart from these, unlike those teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, the full collections of their teachings are no longer available today. Gradually, due to the constant rise and fall of the world, those teachings have all eventually disappeared. Now only the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni continue to live through. When Buddha Shakyamuni became enlightened in this world, and especially during the fruit period, as we can see from scriptures like the Vinaya Sutra and the Agama Sutra, the Buddha's 500 Arhats, countless great bodhisattva and bhikkhus entourages appeared in this world one after another. But all of them, including the Buddha and his retinues, have already entered nirvana now. At the time when the Buddha was approaching nirvana, Mahaprajapati Gotami, also known as the mother of all beings, once saw the Buddha manifest illness and sneeze. And Mahaprajapati Gotami said, "May the Buddha live long in this world." The Buddha said, "You shouldn't say this. You should say, May the Dharma remain long in this world. If the Buddha were to live long in this world, many beings who cling to permanence would not generate renunciation. After Buddha's teaching, Mahaprajapati Gotami, perhaps as a form of repentance, along with 500 bhikkhunis, demonstrated entering nirvana. I mentioned before when teaching history that if they were ordinary beings, it would have been suicide. But because arhats have mastery over birth and death, they can leave as they wish. Following this dependent arising, the Buddha himself also entered nirvana. Mahaprajapati Gotami had appeared to demonstrate some unfavorable dependent origination. At the beginning, when she became a nun, it had some effect on Buddhism, and in the end, the circumstances were also not very favorable when she demonstrated entering nirvana. A few days after Mahaprajapati Gotami entered nirvana, Maudgalyayana and Sariputra went to the realms of hungry ghosts and hell and saw a founding teacher of a non-Buddhist school suffering there. Just as explained later in the words of my perfect teacher, after coming back, as requested by that teacher, Maudgalyayana and Sariputra tried to deliver his message to his disciples. The message was to give up on his teaching and follow the Buddha instead. First, Sariputra relayed the message, but because there was no karmic connection to those disciples from previous lives, he wasn't heard. After Maudgalyayana spoke, the non-Buddhists beat him severely. Then, Sariputra and 80,000 arhats demonstrated entering nirvana together. Shortly afterwards, Maudgalyayana also demonstrated entering nirvana along with 70,000 arhats. After that, according to some books, when the Buddha entered nirvana, 80 million arhats also demonstrated entering nirvana. At this time, according to the view of the common vehicle, all of the Buddha and his great retinues successively demonstrated entering nirvana. The Buddhist teachings were like smoke after a fire that has been extinguished. No one was left to transmit them. They were ridiculed by many celestial beings, and later the compilation of teachings gradually began. Therefore, although the Buddha and these noble beings attained perfect enlightenment and can be said to have eliminated all obstacles, in the face of impermanence, they can only demonstrate impermanence. There's no way around it. So, from a historical perspective, Buddha Shakyamuni himself included, along with all his retinues and teachings, also proved to be impermanent. No one can be exempted. It is precisely for this reason that Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche wrote in the Song of Impermanence, the Melody of Waterfall, although the Buddhas, who have attained the perfect freedom and realization, and the sublime beings had appeared in this world like stars in the sky, they passed into parinirvana for the purpose of revealing impermanence. Thinking of this, we'll understand deeply that everything is impermanent. This means that the Buddha, who had attained perfect realization and cessation, and his chief disciples like Sariputra and Maudgalyayana, once appeared in the noble land of India. These inconceivable retinues had appeared in this world, like countless stars in the night sky. But in order to demonstrate impermanence to beings who cling to permanence, they demonstrated entering nirvana. So when you contemplate on this principle, you will deeply realize that all phenomena are impermanent. How so? Because if even these noble beings who are foremost in miraculous powers, transformations, and wisdom cannot combat impermanence in this world, then not to mention ordinary people like us, we should consider ourselves extremely fragile. In comparison to these noble beings, therefore in our practice, the author also requires us to deeply contemplate the levels of these great masters and accomplished ones in history, and then think about what has become of them now, including the Buddha. A wise person, upon arriving in India and seeing the ancient Buddhist sites, should understand it and have heartfelt sadness. I remember in the great treatise on the perfection of wisdom, it also says, "The world-honored one has 10 powers and radiant light. He attained luminous and boundless wisdom." This means that the Buddha has 10 powers. His body possesses radiance, and his wisdom illuminates all worlds. In other words, he comprehends everything and can liberate all sentient beings. Now everything is in the void, but where can we find him? Thinking of this, is there any wise man who is not saddened? From these words, we can also see that the Buddha's wisdom is immeasurable and boundless. His activity of liberating beings is also boundless. But now, he is nowhere to be found. So when a wise person sees only places where the Buddha once turned the wheel of Dharma, a reminder of the fact that the Buddha has already demonstrated entering nirvana, they will surely feel a sense of sadness. If even the Buddha came to this world and demonstrated entering nirvana, then for us ordinary beings, as fragile as ants, what in this world can be permanent? One will certainly generate such thoughts. Whether at the beginning or end of the Buddha's turning of the Dharma wheel, impermanence is the most important teaching. In many teachings of the Kadampa tradition, it is also said that when the Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma at Sarnath, he taught impermanence first in the Four Noble Truth. Impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and no self. After completing all 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, when the Buddha was about to enter nirvana, he taught the Nirvana Sutra as the last one. Upon completion, the Buddha said to his retinues, "Bhikkhus, everything arises dependent on particular conditions." At the same time, the Buddha loosened the upper part of his robe, allowing his disciples to see the Tathagata's body. The birth of a Tathagata is like the bloom of the Udumbara flower. In the future, you should often contemplate that all phenomena are impermanent. Some historical accounts state that after saying this, the Buddha proceeded to lie between 2 sala trees and demonstrated entering parinirvana. The Agama Sutra also says that when the Buddha was about to enter nirvana, he told the bhikkhus, "In this world, there is nothing that can be relied upon. You should renounce worldly pursuits and seek the ultimate nirvana, which is unborn, unaging, unailing, and undying, free from the pain of separation." His last words were, "You should always contemplate the truth of impermanence and change." The last sentence said by the Buddha before he demonstrated entering nirvana, like a worldly person's last will, is to ask us often and always remember the principle of impermanence and change. This is the Buddha's deepest teaching. That's why all the great masters since ancient times have emphasized the importance of the teaching on impermanence. Fellow Dharma practitioners, whether you are lay or monastic, you must practice to truly generate the understanding of impermanence in your mind stream. Moreover, it's not enough to just generate the concept of impermanence. You also need to prepare for future lives by practicing virtuous actions. Then, your practice will be successful. On the other hand, if you don't, then although you may outwardly seek the great Dharma, in reality, you may not achieve much in Buddhist practice. Therefore, in the face of impermanence, whether noble beings or ordinary beings, none are exempted. All are vanquished by impermanence. Of course, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas demonstrate entering nirvana in this way, while we worldly beings are all completely defeated by impermanence. In a verse of the ancient Buddha Aniruddha, there is a clear description of impermanence, saying, "All conditioned things are ephemeral. like clouds. The wise shouldn't believe them. When the Vajra of impermanence arrives, it will dismantle the noble Lord and the King of mountains. This verse means that all conditioned phenomena are like floating clouds, illusory, unreal, and unreliable. As a wise person, there is nothing to trust in all conditioned phenomena. Today you may think something is beautiful, solid, and sturdy, but in truth its essence is no different from foam or bubbles. So, when the Vajra of impermanence arrives, many noble beings and Buddhas in the world also demonstrate entering nirvana. And even Mount Meru, the king of mountains in this world, will eventually be completely destroyed. Therefore, in the face of impermanence, indeed no one can resist it. This is why the Buddha demonstrated entering nirvana in front of sentient beings. So in the future, when referring to the Buddha, we cannot say the Buddha died. Some Dharma teachers' intended meaning is correct, Vasai, but in their expression, some say the Buddha passed away at the age of 80, as if he were just an ordinary old man. Some say that from a worldly perspective, the Buddha was an 80-year-old man, old, frail, and quite pitiful at the time of death. I think this kind of expression is not appropriate when referring to the Buddha. We should say that the Buddha's true nature is beyond birth and death. But in front of sentient beings, he demonstrated entering nirvana. Some worldly scholars, however, use very inappropriate expressions in their introductions and research on Buddha Shakyamuni's life. They view Buddha Shakyamuni as just a prince who, at the age of 80, grew old and had no choice but to leave the world in the end. It was as if there were no difference between him and worldly figures like Confucius or Mencius, as if he were just a bit wiser and wrote more books or gave more teachings. Other than that, it seemed as if he were no different from ordinary people. This shows a great misunderstanding of the Buddha's true nature. We should understand how the Mahayana view of the Buddha differs from the Hinayana view, and within Mahayana, how the Vajrayana view differs as well. We should fully understand these views to have a clearer picture. When I was translating the great biography of Buddha Shakyamuni before, it occurred to me that we should have a comprehensive understanding of the Buddha, including his aspirations over many lifetimes. Otherwise, many people in the world today think that when the Buddha finally demonstrated entering nirvana, it was like an old man passing away. Treating it this way is certainly unreasonable. In the Parinirvana Sutra, the Buddha clearly stated, in the chapter called the Adamantine Body, the body of the Tathagata is the eternal body, the indestructible body, the Vajra body, not a body sustained by various foods. It is the Dharma body. So, it is not that the physical body people could see will truly enter final nirvana. This is just a demonstration in front of some pitiful sentient beings. In fact, the real Buddha is the Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya is neither a physical body nourished by worldly food, nor the physical body as we perceive. Therefore, we should understand the true nature of the Buddha from various aspects. Nowadays, there are not many who truly understand Buddhism. But since you are a Buddhist, you should comprehensively and holistically understand the Buddha and the Dharma. Therefore, it is crucial to study some history. For example, if you want to understand the true nature of Tibetan Buddhism, then you must learn the history of the major lineages in Tibet. If you wish to understand Chinese Buddhism, such as Pure Land or Chan schools, you shouldn't start off by negating them, but you must recognize the life stories of the great patriarchs and their beneficial activities for the benefit of the teachings and beings. then you will appreciate them in your heart, as you have gained thorough understandings of what these schools are really like. But now, in this degenerate age, some people haven't learnt Tibetan Buddhism at all. Yet they start by claiming that Tibetan Buddhism is not in accordance with the Dharma, and so on. Some people know nothing about Buddhism, yet they carelessly fabricate, based on their own discriminating thoughts, slanders on some Buddhist terms, actions, and ideas. These are all very foolish behaviors. In summary, we must understand the very principles of impermanence, which are the foundation. This is talking about the principle of impermanence of the Buddha and his retinues. The original text continues to say, furthermore, in India, there once lived the 500 arhats who compiled the teachings of the Buddha. There were the 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones, the 80 Siddhas, and many others, who mastered all attributes of the paths and levels and possessed unlimited clairvoyance and miraculous powers. But all that remains of them today are the stories telling how they lived. Let's first look at the 500 arhats in the noble land of India, the birthplace and origin of Buddhism. In the history of Indian Buddhism, it says that they have perfected the qualities of the paths and grounds, with unobstructed miraculous powers and transformations. The noble beings and arhats who participated in the 3 councils were numerous. They held 3 councils after the Buddha's parinirvana. The first of the treatises is called the Abhidharma Mahavibhasa Shastra. The common vehicle generally believes it was composed by many arhats. As for the sutras, in the late period of the Lotus dynasty, there was a king called Chandraraksita, in whose place a scripture appeared. The scripture was the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra. Generally, the sutra tradition considers it to be the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra, while the Tantra tradition considers it to be the Tathagatagarbha Tantra. Many historians and scholars believe it to be the earliest of all scriptures. Dujom Rinpoche said so in his book History of Buddhism. Some people suppose that Buddhist scriptures were only written down after the last of the 3 councils, which is unreasonable, because the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra appeared in the world before the 3 councils were even held. So the earliest scripture is the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra. In our area of Tibet, for lay people, there is a tradition to obtain a copy of the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra in every household. I've asked some elderly people the reason, but they don't know, and said the tradition has always been there. Anyway, each family should obtain a copy of the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra. During the Cultural Revolution, however, Buddhism basically disappeared in every household. When religious policies were slightly more relaxed, I heard that the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra being sold on streets was sold out quickly, and everyone brought a copy home. So I wonder if this is the origin of that tradition. I'm not entirely sure of the specific reason. In any case, but when a family is established, they first obtain a copy of the Ashtasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra and keep it at home. This is the tradition. So, from a historical perspective, in the sacred land of India, there were many arhats who compiled the teachings and also eventually demonstrated entering nirvana, especially during the 3rd council of compilation. In fact, the 3rd council spanned the reigns of 3 kings, and there were constant disputes among some schools within the Hinayana. Later, they began to compile and write down the teachings. How about the Buddha Shakyamuni's Mahayana teachings? There are the 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones, including Nagarjuna, prophesied by the Buddha, was the founder of Madhyamaka and the author of treatises. The first author of Madhyamaka treatises was Nagarjuna. The author of Yogacara treatises, also prophesied by the Buddha, was Asanga. The author of Buddhist logic was Dignaga, who had met Manjushri in person. These three are called the three great originators of authoring treatises. Those who explained their views were Aryadeva, born from a lotus, interpreted Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka views. Vasubandhu, who could recite 990,000 scriptures, explained Asanga's Yogacara views. Dharmakirti, who attained freedom and had met the Buddha in person, explicated Dignaga's views. These latter three are called the three great trailblazers of commentating. The former wrote treatises, and the latter wrote commentaries. Among them, Nagarjuna and Asanga are also said in some history books to be the two supreme ones. The two supreme ones are Nagarjuna and Asanga. In addition, Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha were the authors and propagators of Vinaya. These two, with the remaining four together, are called the 6 ornaments. In other history books, the two supreme ones are Gunaprabha and Shakyaprabha, and the remaining 6 are the 6 ornaments. Either way, they adorned the whole world. By propagating Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings in this human realm, these 8 masters are called the 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones. They are recognized by Chinese Buddhism and all Mahayana traditions. There are also the 2 marvelous masters, Kandragaman and Shantideva. In addition to them, there were also the 80 Mahasiddhas. I've introduced some of their stories in Buddhist Masters of Enchantment. There's another book, Biography of the 84 Great Accomplishers, that talks about many of them, including stories of Saraha, Virupa, and others. There was a great accomplished master called Lawapa, also known as Kambala, or the black blanket-clad yogin, meaning this great master only had one piece of clothing. He often manifested various miraculous signs in front of people. Once, Mara girls cast a rain of stones at him. He bestowed blessings through the generation stage. Within the entire range of his visualized protective circle, no stone could fall down. He thought, if the generation stage has such great power, then the completion stage might be even better. Then he applied the completion stage, and all the stones stopped in the air. Some history books say that these stones are still suspended in the air or on some boulders. It's said they can still be seen today. Another time, Lawapa was lying in front of the royal palace. Some people who were disrespectful and didn't bow to him all became stiff until they respectfully prostrated to him. He lay sleeping like this at the palace gate for 12 years. Many people had no choice but to show respect to him. Once, when Lawapa was at a charnel ground, there were 500 female Mara in that kingdom planning to harm him. When they had just arrived at the charnel ground, they saw only Lawapa's clothes at his dwelling place. He himself was not there. The Mara girls began to confer with each other, to come up with a way to make him miserable. They decided to tear his only clothes into 500 pieces, and each Mara ate one. After a while, the great master suddenly emerged, casting a spell at them. And all 500 Maras were turned into ewes. They were in great pain and ran to the king, pleading, "This monk has harmed us. Please find a way to catch him." Later, the king went to look for him and found him naked in the charnel ground, as his only cloth was eaten. So Lawapa stood up naked and said to the king, Your witches have eaten all my clothes. If I don't summon them, I can't recover my clothes. Later, the king and some ngakpas worked together to summon all the Mara girls. When they came before Lawapa, he used the threatening mudra to point at each Mara girl. As he pointed, they immediately transformed into creatures with different heads. 500 of them transformed into different head shapes. In the end, they all deeply regretted their action and kept begging him. Then he made them repent and vomit out the clothes. When the pieces of clothes were vomited out, all the pieces were put together, but a part was missing. They were supposed to be eaten by 3 consorts. The king sent people to fetch them. After they were found, the clothes were finally reassembled. Once reassembled, he chanted mantras to restore the clothing's original state. So even such miraculous Mahasiddha eventually also demonstrated entering nirvana. Now, only some historical records and stories survived. Other than his stories, there are many extraordinary biographies in the history of Indian Buddhism that are truly incredible, especially those great accomplished masters who studied Vajrayana. But now, all of them have succumbed to impermanence. Unable to escape, they have all passed into parinirvana. In the snowy land of Tibet, when the second Buddha of Odhyana turned the vast wheel of Dharma leading to maturation and liberation, there appeared the 25 accomplished masters of king and subjects, as well as the 80 great Siddhas of Yerpa. Later emerged the 3 masters of So, Zur, and Nup of the ancient tradition. Marpa, Milarepa, and Dagpo of the new tradition, and innumerable other learned and accomplished beings. That is to say, the second Buddha came to this world. It should be okay to call him the second Buddha. Some people might question, how can we say Padmasambhava is the second Buddha? How can there be 2 Buddhas? We can't call him the second Buddha. Actually, these challenges are incorrect. For example, Nagarjuna is sometimes also referred to as the second Buddha. So is Vasubandhu. Master Chiai of the Tiantai school in China is often called Shakyamuni Jr. by later generations. The great Shakyamuni Buddha was in India, and the Shakyamuni Jr. was in China. So if we can say Shakyamuni Jr., we can also say second Buddha. If we are well informed of Tibetan Vajrayana, especially Padmasambhava's contribution to Buddhism and his unique power in the degenerate age, you can't help but generate faith because you truly know some of Padmasambhava's qualities. I often think that because of Padmasambhava's blessings, there are so many Tibetan Buddhist traditions today. Even though it's the degenerate age with various 5 turbidities raging like storms, constantly stirring up waves here, Tibetan Buddhism has remained intact. It is all thanks to his unique blessings. At that time, Padmasambhava gave empowerments to ripen the mind of beings and taught instructions to liberate them. When he turned the wheel of Dharma in this way, there also appeared Padmasambhava's 25 main disciples known as the king and subjects. The achievement stories of each of the 25 main disciples are recorded in biographies. Some are also included in Dujom Rinpoche's The Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism. Reading them one by one, you will find that some mastered fire and some mastered wind. It's truly incredible. There were also 80 Siddhas of Yerpa. These are the ones documented in writing. In reality, there were thousands upon thousands of accomplished beings. In Vajrayana, the Nyingma tradition masters of So, Zur and Nub clans are So Yeshe Wangchuk, Zur Shakya Jungne, and Nub Sangye Yeshe. Many may know the stories of Maria Lotsawa, Milarepa, and Tapopa, but the Nyingma masters of So, Zur, and Nub clans are quite foreign to many. In fact, each of them has a substantial biography in Buddhist history, but many people may not know. I will not elaborate any further here, but I will complete the translation of Dudjom Rinpoche's The Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism this year, and I hope that everyone reads it at least once. After reading it, you may gain a new understanding of Vajrayana, especially the entire history of Tibetan Buddhism. Why are many people familiar with Milarepa's biography? Because it was translated into Chinese in the 1960s. Therefore, when Milarepa is mentioned, everyone knows about him. However, when Nubchen Sangye Yeshe is mentioned, nobody has heard of him. So I think having access to history is very important. If you are aware of some signs of a person's great accomplishment, you are unlikely to doubt them or develop wrong views about them. These great accomplished masters were truly inconceivable. Most of them had attained the highest realizations, having mastery over the four elements. They could manifest miraculous displays, making the substantial insubstantial and the insubstantial substantial. Fire could not burn them, water could not drown them, earth could not crush them, and they could not fall into dangerous places. They were simply free from any harm that the four elements could bring about. Be they Indian or Tibetan great accomplished masters, the four elements cannot harm them, as they have attained mastery. Here's an example given. When Jetsun Milarepa was dwelling in silent retreat in the Nishankadaya cave of Nepal, some hunters came upon him. They asked him, "Are you human or ghost?" It seems that hunters, butchers, and other villains sometimes have nothing better to do but cause troubles for great accomplished masters. The Jetsun remained silent, sitting motionless, gazing into space. He spoke not a word. So the hunters shot many poisoned arrows at Milarepa, but none could strike him. Though they kept shooting, not a single arrow found its mark. Next, they dragged him into water and threw him into deep ravines, but the master would simply float back up and return to his original seat. Whatever these hunters tried, throwing him into fire or casting him off cliffs, nothing had any effect on Milarepa. Finally, they piled wood around him and tried to set it ablaze, but the fire would not catch. The fire could not be kindled. Someone as great as Milarepa also demonstrated nirvana. So we really need to contemplate on the profound lesson of impermanence, not just a history one. In the past, Venerable Potawa had more than 2,000 disciples. Among them, 500 disciples had already generated renunciation with this life in their mind streams, and attained signs through meditation on impermanence. We don't know how many people after practicing here truly perceive that all phenomena are impermanent. Earlier, we talked about the impermanence of the material universe and the world of sentient beings in general. No sentient being can elude impermanence, not even those eminent masters, Buddhas and noble ones. They have already in this world attained mastery over everything, mastering all elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. Why aren't these people still in this world, living forever? Why? It's impossible to exist forever in this world. When we open a history book, biographies of eminent masters repeatedly remind us of impermanence. When reading biographies of eminent masters from Tibet, it is natural to realize that everything really is impermanent. Look, so many eminent masters appeared in this world, with their unimaginable miraculous powers and abilities. But now not a single one remains. Similarly, we continue to contemplate on eminent monks and masters in Chinese Buddhism. For example, in the Pure Land school of Chinese Buddhism, from Master Huiyuan of Donglin Temple on Lushan Mount to Master Yin Guang, there were, some historical accounts say, 13 generations. These 13 generations of eminent masters have all entered nirvana one after another. Now only their teachings and some historical records remain. Then let's look at the Vinaya school. From Master Daoxuan of the Tang dynasty until it was finally passed down to Master Hong Yi, there may have been 11 generations. In between there were also many eminent masters who upheld the precepts. Now there is only the history of them left. There's also the Huayan school. According to their tradition, Huayan school first started from Asvaghosha and Nagarjuna. It was transmitted to China to Master Dushun. From Master Dushun it was passed down to the 7th generation. Again, all that is left is just historical records. The very prosperous Chan school is the same. The 28th Indian patriarch Bodhidharma, after coming to China, is recognized as the first generation of the Chan school in China. It was passed down to the 6th patriarch Huineng. After the 6th patriarch Huineng, as Bodhidharma had already prophesied, the robe and bowl, the lineage would not be passed down, but the Dharma seal could be transmitted. After the 6th patriarch, although there was no single lineage transmission, it split into 5, such as Linji, Faiyan, and Caodong schools, etc. Although these schools of Chan are still being transmitted today, those earlier eminent masters have all manifested entering nirvana one after another. Many of these great masters were emanations of great Mahasiddhi. For example, Master Dushun, whom I just mentioned, is very famous in Huayan school. And people call him an emanation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. How do we know he was an emanation of Manjushri? It's said that when Master Dushun was alive, he would go to the mountains to farm during the day and recite the Avatamsaka Sutra every night, year after year. The same routine repeats every day, farming during the day and reciting the Avatamsaka Sutra at night. In fact, I really admire this kind of behavior. Ordinary as it seems by appearance, as if there's nothing else to do every day besides this. But in reality, practitioners should go for distance and stick to one practice for a long time. Otherwise, you see a guru today and say, "Hello, guru, you are truly a wish-fulfilling jewel. Do you have any instructions? Please teach me a recitation practice. I want to start learning." And he does teach you. After a while, your enthusiasm is gone. Then you'd look for another guru. Today, you seek an emanation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. Tomorrow, an emanation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. The day after, an emanation of Mahastama Prapta Bodhisattva. Searching like this every day. After a few years, you don't even know what you've learned or how much you've forgotten. This approach is not very helpful. Instead, when you develop faith in a guru and teachings that you have a connection with, you should consistently rely on them for a lifetime, from the day you generate faith until you leave this world. This is paramount. Back to Master Dushun. At that time, he was like this year in, year out. He had a disciple who had stayed with him for over 10 years. At the beginning, the disciple had great faith in him. Later, the disciple seemed to feel that there was not much to learn from the master. The exact same routine was exercised every day, farming during the day and reciting the Avatamsaka Sutra at night. There was nothing else. Later, he wanted to leave, requesting, "I want to go to Mount Wutai." Maybe it was an excuse, or he really wanted to see Manjushri Bodhisattva. At first, the master didn't agree and said, "You should stay here. There's no other Manjushri Bodhisattva." But he wouldn't give up and kept requesting. "Well, master, since you say so, I'll stay for a few days." After a few days, he'd come up with excuses and requests to leave. Finally, Master Dushun said, If you must go, take 2 letters for me." On the back of the letters were some addresses. One letter was for Lady Ching, and the other for Old Mother Pig. On the way to Mount Wutai, the disciple inquired about them. Through the address and inquiries, he finally found Lady Ching's place. When he got there, it turned out to be a brothel. The so-called Lady Ching was a prostitute. When he met her, he was shocked and wondering, how could my master have a prostitute friend? Regardless, he gave the letter to the prostitute, and after reading the letter, she died immediately. The disciple thought it was very unusual, so he picked up the letter and read, "Avalokiteshvara, my work is done, and you should go too." He still didn't quite connect the dots yet, and continued on his journey looking for the second one, Old Mother Pig. He finally arrived at the address, which turned out to be a pigsty, and she was a large sow. Then the disciple placed the letter in front of Old Mother Pig. Old Mother Pig, just as we mentioned before in the aspiration prayer for Sukhavati, opened the letter with her nose, and then the sow died on the spot. After she died, the disciple found it unusual again. He immediately picked up the letter and read it, which said, "Samantabhadra, my work is done, and you should go too." The disciple still didn't realize what was happening, and he continued on his journey. When he arrived at Mount Wutai, he met an old man. He asked, "I want to see Manjushri Bodhisattva." The old man told him, "Actually, your master is Manjushri Bodhisattva. You've come to Mount Wutai, but there's no other Manjushri Bodhisattva here." At this moment, he developed faith in his master. But suddenly, the old man disappeared without a trace. Then he finally realized that there was never a need to go to Mount Wutai to see Manjushri Bodhisattva. He hurried back, but when he returned, his master had passed into parinirvana many days ago, so he didn't get to see him again. People only later learned that Master Dushun was Manjushri. Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Samantabhadra used different methods to liberate beings. This is somewhat similar to stories in Pure Land history, although not exactly the same. As we can see, the emanations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are inconceivable. They appear among animals, prostitutes and butchers, but we may not recognize them, especially when they are alive. As Longchenpa said, "When I'm alive, my teachings may not flourish. When I'm alive, you may not have faith in me." As is the case with Master Dushun, they didn't recognize him when he was alive. Such accomplished masters also demonstrated entering nirvana. This was an emanation of Manjushri Bodhisattva. There is also Chan Master Yanshu, whom we mentioned from time to time. He was an emanation of Amitabha Buddha. In the kingdom of Wuyue, during the 5 dynasties period when the world was quite chaotic, the king of Wuyue, however, was very devout and believed in Buddhism. His royal teacher was Chan Master Yongming. Once he held an almsgiving for 1,000 monks, treating all monastics equally. Although there was no particular order for the almsgiving ceremony, the seating arrangement still had a high seat. That's about the only distinction. No one dared to sit in that high seat because Chan Master Yongming was the royal teacher. But Yongming was also very humble, repeatedly declining. In the end, no one sat there. At that time, there was a monk with big ears wearing tattered robes. He went straight to the high seat and sit in the highest position. They all participated in receiving the offerings together. During the offering, the king felt a bit upset, as his royal teacher didn't sit in the highest seat, but a strange monk with big ears sat there. So he felt a bit uneasy. But since it was supposed to be an equal offering to all monks, he didn't say anything. After the offering was over and everyone dispersed, he said to Chan Master Yongming, "Among the Sangha that we made offerings to today, were there any noble ones or bodhisattvas?" Yongming said, "Yes, there was an emanation of Dipankara Buddha present in the Sangha today." The king asked, "Who was that?" Yongming said, "It was the monk with big ears." Hearing this, the king gained great faith. But the monk had already left, so the king immediately sent guards to find him. Eventually, the monk was found in a cave. The guards passed on the message saying, "The king invites you back to the palace to receive his offerings." At this time, the big-eared monk was very displeased and said, "Amitabha said too much." Amitabha referred to Chan Master Yongming, and talk too much means he spilt the beans. After saying this, he demonstrated entering parinirvana. Those guards at the time realized that he was truly an ancient Buddha emanation. So when they came back to reply to the king asked them, "Did you find Dipankara Buddha?" They said, "The Buddha has already entered parinirvana, but we found Amitabha Buddha." The king was very faithful upon hearing the encounter story. With great happiness, the king wanted to see Chan Master Yongming immediately. On their way to the master's meditation room, someone came down in a hurry, almost bumping into the king. Then Entourage asked him what happened. He said that Chan Master Yongming had also entered parinirvana. There seemed to be a pattern in history, that when one emanation of Buddha or Bodhisattva entered parinirvana, others would follow one after another. This phenomenon of entering parinirvana one after another is quite common. These eminent masters indeed appeared in great numbers, both recorded in Tibetan and Chinese Buddhism, but they have all demonstrated entering nirvana. So by now, we have analyzed above the life stories and parinirvana of some eminent masters from Tibet, India, and China. Through these stories, we can see that there have been many beings who attained such powers, but in the end, they all chose to demonstrate that everything is impermanent, and today all that remains of them is their stories, their legacy. In Tibet, many great accomplished masters don't even have biographies, with only some legends passed down through history. In fact, enormous great accomplished masters came to this world to benefit countless beings, especially the remarkable Turtons or treasure revealers in Tibet. Padmasambhava once said, in different places, Turtons would appear. These Turtons are all my monuments. Even in small places like Sertar and Drango, some Turtons left behind a good amount of Terma treasures, some of which are not even recorded in history. I have read Dujum Rinpoche's The Nyingma School of Tibetan Buddhism, and noticed that many Turtons from this area are basically not included in the writing. Thus, in this world, numerous great accomplished beings have passed by us unnoticed, unseen, unheard. We, on the other hand, are driven by past negative karma, blown by winds of adverse conditions, and influenced by negative habits. On top of all that, our mind streams dependent on impure bodies composed of 4 elements. And as we can never be sure when or where this illusory body is going to disintegrate, it is important that from this moment onwards, we should always inspire ourselves to positive and virtuous thoughts, words and deeds. With this aspiration in mind, meditate and practice diligently. We have indeed created many negative actions in our past lives, such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, etc. This body is formed by negative actions, in the midst of the 5 degenerations, always blown about by various deluded conditions. We drift, driven by the karmic wind in samsara. At the same time, in our mind stream, deeply rooted are many negative habits from past lives. What is reliable about such a mind with strong clings onto conditions, while depending on the composite of 4 elements? Even the great accomplished masters of the past have all demonstrated entering nirvana. As to us, whether it's the mind or the body that the mind depends upon, none is reliable at all. It is to say that if a very exquisite imported product is easy to be dismantled, then a domestically produced counterfeit would be even more prone to damage. So the body of ordinary beings is not reliable at all. Therefore, in order to attain the truth, we should start practicing from now on and meditate on death and impermanence. Back then, a disciple of Gampopa was remarkable. He is an accomplished practitioner. A disciple from Kham area kept asking him to teach the Dharma. He kept refusing to teach, but the disciple kept asking repeatedly. Later, holding the disciple's hand, he said, "You will die, and I will die too. This is what my teacher taught me, and there's nothing more to teach." At that time, this calm disciple also practiced on this teaching continuously. In the end, he attained realization as well. Nowadays, if we say, "You will die, and I will die too," the listener might not be satisfied and say, "I understand this point. You don't need to teach me." But for those with faith, through such a teaching, they too can attain realization. Therefore, we must think of the past eminent masters in various ways by learning history, and then contemplate upon how these great accomplished masters propagated the Dharma at that time, but now nothing remains except a name. Not to mention ordinary beings like me. I will certainly leave this world. When the time comes, what is the only thing that will be beneficial? It is the Dharma of liberation. So from now on, I must meditate on impermanence, practice the Dharma diligently. Okay, we'll end the lesson here.
Bandara Banma Sadar